Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Tuesday, September 30th, 2025. All right, this episode of Anti-War News is sponsored by the Expat Money Online Summit, which returns this October. This is the third year in a row that they are sponsoring the show and that we are helping promote the event. And the Expat Money Summit is hosted by Mikkel Thorup, the host of the Expat Money Show, a friend of ours at antiwar.com. And this free online event is packed with real strategies that you can use right now, like acquiring second residencies and citizenships, legally mitigating taxes, purchasing international real estate, setting up offshore banking, and more. This year's summit is focused on Latin America, and for very good reason, with all of the changing dynamics down there, and that is where Mikkel is based as well. So over 3 jam-packed days from October 10th to the 12th, Mikkel is bringing together top-tier experts to help you build your offshore plan B quickly and effectively in the region. Head over to expatmoneysummit.com to reserve your free ticket today. And once again, I will be speaking on one of the exclusive VIP panels. So if you want to get a VIP ticket, listeners of this show can use the code ANTIWAR for 20% off a VIP ticket, which includes lifetime replays, exclusive panels, and more. So go to expatmoneysummit.com and don't forget to use that code ANTIWAR if you want a VIP ticket for 20% off. Once again, expatmoneysummit.com. All right, so the big news from Monday, of course, was Netanyahu's visit to the White House, during which the Trump administration released a Gaza ceasefire proposal, and they had a big press conference about it. So we're going to start with that. We're going a little out of order on the page here, but I want to start with this first. So the White House released a 20-point plan for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip on Monday, as President Trump hosted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for his 4th visit to Washington this year. During a joint press conference, Netanyahu said that he has accepted the proposal, though we have seen him repeatedly sabotage ceasefire deals, and it looks like he's up to his old tricks here with this one. We'll get into that in the next story, but there are also several points that Hamas may not accept. So Netanyahu said that if Hamas does not accept the U.S.-Israeli proposal, Israel will finish the job in Gaza, which is just a very ominous way, very ominous language considering what's happening in Gaza. And Trump said that he's willing to continue backing the slaughter. Trump said, quote, if Hamas rejects the deal, Bibi, you will have our full backing to do what you have to do, end quote. Full backing. So the deal would involve an immediate ceasefire followed by Hamas releasing all remaining Israeli captives. Once that happens, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1,700 Palestinians who have been thrown in Israeli prisons after October 7th, including all women and children detained in that context. The deal includes a phased Israeli withdrawal, although it would allow Israel to maintain control of a buffer zone inside Gaza's border until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. That's the language in the proposal, and this is one of the potential sticking points for Hamas. We're going to get more into the withdrawal thing in the next story as well. So the agreement would establish a temporary transitional government headed by apolitical Palestinians, but they will be overseen by a so-called Board of Peace. And Trump will be the chair of this board that's overseeing Gaza. And another person mentioned that will be part of this board is former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, which I just can't believe that they're thinking, we got to make peace in this region. Let's bring Tony Blair into the mix. But he's been very involved in crafting these plans. So has Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner was at the White House for the press conference. Trump said he was very involved in all these plans. So this deal suggests a reformed Palestinian Authority could eventually take over governance in Gaza, an idea that Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected. One thing about this deal, and I would recommend going and reading through the 20 points. We have them published at the bottom of the article here. The language is very vague. I mean, there's a lot of details that clearly need to be worked out here, and that's something even Steve Witkoff acknowledged after this big show, this big press conference. But the proposal does say that Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza, and it says that no one will be forced to leave Gaza, which is a break from Trump's previous calls for the Palestinians to be removed from Gaza, which Israeli officials, of course, have jumped on to push for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, which is their ultimate goal. So again, lots of points here, and you could go check it out. But everything's really up in the air right now. Hamas has said that they've received it and that they're studying the proposal. And the Palestinian Authority accepted it. The Arab countries are saying that they all support it, but that doesn't mean that Hamas is going to go for it. I hope that this leads to peace. I mean, the people in Gaza are being slaughtered and starved. They need relief. Another thing is that it would allow aid. It says full aid would be able to enter Gaza, which is an admission that Israel is blocking the aid. Basically immediately that would happen if this deal is implemented. But we'll see. So the next one here, Netanyahu says that the Gaza deal allows the IDF to stay, which is not really what it says. So Netanyahu claimed in a video statement on Monday, and this is after, at the end of the day in Washington, he claimed that the ceasefire proposal released by the White House on Monday allows the Israeli military to stay in the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu said, quote, "It was a historic visit. Instead of Hamas isolating us, we turned things around and isolated Hamas. Now the whole world, including the Arab and Muslim world, is pressuring Hamas to accept the terms that we created together with Trump to bring back all the hostages, the living and the dead, while the IDF stays in the Strip," end quote. According to the outline released by the White House, the ceasefire proposal does not envision a permanent Israeli military occupation of Gaza. It calls for a phased withdrawal that would happen as Gaza demilitarizes and the IDF hands over territory it controls to this temporary international force, dubbed the International Stabilization Force. That's another big question mark. That says that the U.S. would work with Arab countries on establishing this force. And I know previous deals and reports have said that the idea would be it would be a foreign force, but from Arab countries, so it would be Arabs involved in it. So again, big question mark with that. But the deal calls for Israel to hand over all the territory that it occupies to the ISF until it has completely withdrawn from Gaza, except for a security perimeter along Gaza's border with Israel. And this is what they call the buffer zone. About 1 kilometer. It's further than that now, but from the border into Gaza, this area where Israel has completely destroyed everything, leveled everything. And so the deal is saying that they can stay there, but it says that once Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat, as I mentioned in the last story, then Israel also has to pull out of there. So now you see Netanyahu kind of contradicting that, saying that the IDF will stay, although there's different ways to interpret exactly what he said. But it seems like, Netanyahu, I believe his goal right now is to get Hamas to reject this. I think there's a good chance that Hamas comes back with a few amendments and they say, hey, can we get a stronger guarantee on this? Can we change this language? And then they're going to say, oh, they rejected it, full steam ahead with the assault on Gaza City. I hope I'm wrong. I hope peace prevails here. I mean, this needs to end. I mean, the people need relief. And so hopefully this leads to peace. I mean, it just needs to happen. So another thing that Netanyahu said in his video statement is that he would not allow the establishment of a Palestinian state. Part of the ceasefire deal says that if it is fully implemented, it may lead to a credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Netanyahu said that he has not agreed to that and that he would strongly oppose a Palestinian state. So that also sort of contradicts this deal that was published. And one thing that Netanyahu did during negotiations last year, he would make public declarations that went against things Israel agreed to privately. Just for example here, so I linked to a story about this from last year. Basically, Netanyahu said that Israel would not give up control of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the Gaza-Egypt border. But privately, apparently behind the scenes, Israel did agree to withdraw from there. But then Netanyahu goes out and says, no, we're not going to withdraw. So that tells Hamas that any kind of agreements Israel is making behind the scenes, they're not going to stick to. So it seems like he's doing a similar thing here. And from this report at the time, Israeli officials were saying, quoted by Israeli media, saying that Netanyahu was doing that purposely to sabotage the chances of a ceasefire deal. Another thing, I'll mention that in this next story here. So the next one, Netanyahu apologizes to Qatari Prime Minister for bombing Doha. So the White House said in a statement on Monday that during his meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke with Qatar's Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani in a trilateral call and expressed deep regret about bombing Doha. The statement came after several Israeli media outlets reported that Netanyahu apologized to Al Thani about the September 9th strikes that targeted senior Hamas officials who were discussing a U.S. ceasefire proposal. The strikes killed lower-level Hamas officials and one Qatari security officer. The White House statement acknowledged that the Israeli attack came amid ceasefire negotiations. The statement from the White House said, quote, Netanyahu further expressed regret that in targeting Hamas leadership during hostage negotiations, Israel violated Qatari sovereignty, end quote. So the statement said that Netanyahu told Al Thani that the killing of the Qatari officer was unintentional, and he pledged that Israel will not conduct such an attack again in the future. Trump's story is that he was not aware of Israel's plans to bomb Doha, which I do not believe. And Israeli officials have said that he was notified beforehand and did not stop Israel. But I think this is something, Trump wanted Netanyahu to do. So one thing I'm concerned about is Monday, this is all going on. All the news of, when it comes to U.S.-Israel is about this Gaza deal. Nobody's talking about the West Bank. We know that Netanyahu was going to push for the annexation. Trump said he wouldn't support it, but, there was nothing about the West Bank mentioned in the ceasefire deal. And then the other thing is Iran, this kind of brewing second potential war with Iran that I think we're headed in that direction. And, Netanyahu, the fact that he got that Trump got him to do this kind of public apology to Qatar and agree, at least publicly, to this Gaza ceasefire proposal. I'm sure Netanyahu wanted something in return for doing those things. And again, we see signs moving toward another war with Iran, especially with the snapback sanctions. So I'm worried that he might have gotten some guarantee from Trump about support for another future attack on Iran. And again, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I'm really hoping and going to pray that there is a ceasefire here, that people in Gaza get relief. But there's just some things, some bad signs here. Although one thing I will say, watching the press conference, Trump made a really big show of this whole thing, if that means anything. All right, so the next one here. Poll says that 40% of Americans believe Israel is intentionally killing civilians. So this one's from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So a new survey asking about the onslaught in Gaza found Americans continued to shift away from supporting Israel. The poll conducted by the New York Times and Siena found that 40% of Americans believe Israel is intentionally killing innocent Palestinians in Gaza, compared to just 16% who said Israel is not intentionally killing civilians. So it's a pretty big difference there. 40% say they are, just 16% said that they're not. I guess that means that the remainder said they weren't sure. This is obvious to anyone who's been following this, but just another report, another poll here showing that the support for Israel among Americans is just nosediving. And, this is something Netanyahu is very aware of, which is why he met with those influencers the other day. And, so I think this is part of his calculations, and, makes him even more dangerous, that thinking that, this administration might be the most there might not be another administration that's as pro-Israel as this one. That might sound too optimistic, because it's not like this opposition to arming Israel among Americans is translating to Congress, but you know what I mean. He knows that in the future, the long term, Israel is in trouble when it comes to support from the U.S. All right, so the next one here, the IDF kills 50 Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. So the slaughter in Gaza continues. Gaza's health ministry said on Monday that Israeli forces killed at least 50 Palestinians and wounded 184 over the previous 24-hour period as the IDF continues its assault on Gaza City and attacks across the Strip. This picture, these are little girls who were bombed by Israel, wounded in Israeli airstrikes while Netanyahu was in D.C., and I saw other videos and pictures of I mean, just the horrors, the atrocities, the genocide continues every single day. So most of the people killed were killed in Gaza City on Monday, but they continue to launch attacks in southern and central Gaza. So the UN's Child Relief Agency, UNICEF, said on Monday that 25 ill or premature babies in incubators in Gaza City are at risk due to the Israeli assault. And medics told Reuters that the Al Hello hospital, where 12 of the babies were located, was shelled by Israeli forces overnight. And the spokesman for UNICEF said that some of the babies are sharing incubators due to the shortages caused by the Israeli blockade. Israel has denied the import of some incubators. I mean, how can you possibly justify denying that? And this is just, the situation in Gaza City is just, there's famine taking place. It's just as horrific as can be, and this assault continues. So the next one here, the global Sumud flotilla is less than 250 nautical miles from Gaza. So the flotilla of boats attempting to bring aid to starving Palestinians living under the Israeli blockade in the Gaza Strip is less than 250 nautical miles from the Palestinian territory and less than 100 nautical miles from entering a high-risk zone, according to a statement released by the group. The Global Sumud Flotilla said on Telegram, quote, "As we get closer to Gaza and to the high-risk zone, we will be updating you regularly so that you can be on high alert with us. Witness is protection. We need your eyes on the flotilla and your pressure on international institutions to keep everyone safe and to help us achieve our goal of breaking the siege and opening a humanitarian corridor," end quote. According to a flotilla tracker, 42 boats are taking part in the effort. On Monday, Turkey coordinated a rescue operation for one of the flotilla boats, the Johnny M, after it began taking on water in its engine room. Not sure what the cause of that was, but according to Turkish media, passengers on the Johnny M came from various countries, including Luxembourg, France, Finland, Mexico, and Malaysia. And apparently Turkish drones have been circling the flotilla, keeping an eye on it, and Spain and Italy deployed warships to potentially help with rescue efforts as well. Another thing that happened on Monday, Rashida Tlaib, the Democrat from Michigan in the House, she led a letter to President Trump calling for the U.S. to guarantee safe passage for the flotilla. And according to that letter, there are 24 U.S. citizens on these boats. So certainly going to keep an eye on this in the coming days. All right, so the next one here, IDF chief warned that Gaza City attack lacked political endgame. So this is an article from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. So before the IDF launched its attack on Gaza City, the head of the Israeli military attempted to warn Benjamin Netanyahu's government that the operation lacked a political endgame and that it would endanger the lives of the hostages. E.L. Zamir, the IDF chief of staff, this is kind of confirming previous reports that we have seen, but that he was warning against this, behind the scenes. That's at least what the report said. Publicly, he was, supporting it, but basically saying that there's going to be a lot of Israeli casualties, that the Israelis being held by Hamas, if in Gaza City, could be killed. And Netanyahu basically said, whatever, I don't care. But another thing he said is that it lacks a political endgame, a political purpose. And I really think that this is a factor in all of this, that the IDF has basically been saying, that they can't really pull this off, what Netanyahu wants them to do in Gaza City. Yet they continue to go through with the horrific destruction campaign. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes in Lebanon kill 2. This article is from Jason Ditz. So various Israeli strikes against southern and eastern Lebanon on Monday have left at least 2 people killed and 1 wounded. The attacks appear to have generally targeted civilian infrastructure, and the IDF has yet to explain the rationale. The Lebanese Health Ministry reported that one of the strikes targeted an excavator in the eastern Bekaa Valley, and another strike went after a water tanker in Nabatia al-Fawqa. plainly a civilian target. So at least 2 killed in the daily or near daily Israeli strikes on Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, 4 Alawites killed in Syria's Hama as sectarian violence continues. Another one from Jason. So the violence, the killing of minorities in Syria continues. There was a report of gunmen attacking and killing 4 Alawite construction workers in the village of Jidreen in the Hama governorate. And the attack came after the government security forces had removed security checkpoints from the village. The gunmen in this case were not identified, but consistently the attacks on the Alawites have been government adjacent, either gunmen from the militias loyal to the ruling Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, or outright members of the Interior Ministry. And, you know, Assad was an Alawite, and so they've, you know, this part of the reason for this crackdown and these massacres of Alawites. And it was in, back in March, when there was the huge massacre where over 1,300 people were killed in just a matter of a week or a few days. But these killings have gone on just at a smaller scale, and they get very little attention. As Shara, you know, the former al-Qaeda commander who took over Syria, got this very warm welcome in New York City at the UN General Assembly. All right, so the next one here, Maduro says he is ready for a state of emergency if the U.S. attacks. So Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said on Monday that President Nicolas Maduro is ready to declare a state of emergency in case of a U.S. military attack, comments that come amid reports that say the U.S. is considering bombing targets inside Venezuela. Rodriguez said that Maduro has signed a decree that would allow him to mobilize the military throughout the country and put it in charge of public services and the oil industry in the event of an attack. Maduro has also mobilized a militia amid the military pressure from the U.S. The Trump administration has deployed warships to the Caribbean and bombed at least 3 boats over claims that they were running drugs. The death toll is at least 17 based on Trump's numbers. And as we've been covering, U.S. officials told the New York Times that combating drugs is the pretext, but the real goal is regime change in Venezuela. And we've seen these reports that they're considering strikes directly inside Venezuela. Rodriguez called the U.S. claims about drug trafficking a big lie and said that the U.S. really sought to seize Venezuela's natural resources, which include the largest oil reserves in the world. She said, quote, "It has only one purpose and objective, the reserves of oil, gas, gold, minerals, and the biological wealth that Venezuela has, and which they need for this new era in which the U.S. government declares war on the entire planet," end quote. All right, so the next one here, Russia says it is analyzing potential U.S. Tomahawks to Ukraine. So the Kremlin said on Monday that it was analyzing the possibility of the U.S. providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, a step that would mark a significant escalation of the proxy war. The comments from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov came after U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said that President Trump was considering the possibility of supplying Ukraine with Tomahawks, which have a range of over 1,000 miles, by selling them to European NATO countries. Peskov said, quote, "We have heard these statements. We are thoroughly analyzing them. Our military specialists are closely monitoring it," end quote. Peskov also downplayed the idea that the Tomahawks would make a difference for Ukraine. He said, quote, "Even if it happens that the United States sends its Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine, currently there is no cure-all that could be a game changer on the front lines for the Kiev regime. No magical weapons exist, and Tomahawk or other missiles simply won't be a game changer," end quote. So kind of downplaying the whole thing. And with a range of over 1,000 miles, Tomahawks would put Moscow well in range of Ukrainian missile strikes. And we've seen Zelensky threaten basically strikes on Kremlin officials if the war continues. And so another thing that was interesting, so I learned this today. So I was mentioning yesterday, the thing with the Tomahawks is that they're designed to be fired out of U.S. Navy warships and submarines. The U.S. has developed a land-based launcher known as the Typhoon since it withdrew from the INF Treaty, which banned land-based missiles at the range that Tomahawks are at. But there was another launcher that the U.S. developed, and I forgot about this one. They called it the Long Range Fires Launcher that was designed specifically for the U.S. Marine Corps. And this is part of their strategy over in Asia. They want to they've created these new Marine Corps units that are basically like island-hopping Marines, and they want to arm them with some serious missiles. And so they created these long-range fire systems that can fire Tomahawks. But apparently there's an issue with the maneuverability. something about the way it's set up. They don't move well on the sand, and the idea is that these are for amphibious landing teams to bring these missile systems on shore. So they've actually given up. They've scrapped the project, the long-range fires. But they have a few of these launchers now laying around. And there was some Ukrainian media, Defense Express, like a Ukrainian military blog, basically suggesting that the U.S. could use these launchers. They would need to refit them. Some of that stuff got too technical for me to really understand, but this is a potential option, is refitting these launchers and giving them to Ukraine. But again, this would be just a huge escalation. I mean, you just imagine any other... I mean, you can't even fathom it. The U.S. being in a war where Russia is providing the other side with missiles that can, hit Washington, D.C. or something like that. And we've seen Russia, an official on the Defense Committee on Russia's State Duma warned that any troops involved in helping Ukraine fire Tomahawk missiles could be potential targets of the Russian military. All right, so the next one here, the War Department wants major increase in missiles. So the U.S. War Department is pushing U.S. weapons makers to double or even quadruple the production of missiles to help the U.S. military prepare for a potential future war with China. And this was reported by the Wall Street Journal on Monday. The report said that senior Pentagon officials expressed a desire for a significant increase in production during a series of meetings with representatives from several U.S. missile manufacturers. Steve Feinberg, the deputy U.S. Secretary of War, has taken a leading role in the effort, which has been dubbed the Munitions Acceleration Council, and he regularly speaks with executives about this. It's funny, the War Department, the Secretary of War, the mainstream outlets like the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, they're not using it. They're still calling him the Defense Secretary and the Deputy Defense Secretary, which I think is kind of funny. So the U.S. military has been openly preparing for a war with China for years, despite the obvious risk of nuclear war. And the preparations have involved expanding the U.S. military footprint in the Asia Pacific, building alliances in the region, and increasing weapon shipments to Taiwan. The Journal report said that the effort at expanding missile production is focused on weapons the Pentagon believes that it needs for a conflict with China, including Patriot interceptors, long-range anti-ship missiles, the Standard Missile-6 or SM-6 precision strike missiles, and joint air-surface standoff missiles. So I know the Patriots and the SM-6, they've used a lot of those. Well, they used a lot of Patriots when Iran attacked their base in Qatar in retaliation for the U.S. bombing Iran's nuclear facilities. And I know the SM-6 missiles, they've used a lot of them intercepting Iranian drones and missiles that have been fired at Israel. So China, there's a lot to get into here. I haven't been covering, China and the whole situation over there much lately, but really the point I wanted to make in this article here is that basically, since the first Trump administration, China became like the priority, and that was reaffirmed by the National Defense Strategy published during the Biden administration that identified China as the top threat. And we've seen these moves toward, building these alliances and expanding the U.S. military footprint, and the U.S. military openly saying that they're getting ready to fight and win a war with China in the future. But there's reports now that the new NDS is going to prioritize the homeland and the Western Hemisphere, basically Latin America, over China, which could be significant. But this military buildup is still going on. I think there's a sign that the Pentagon might think it's too late, really, to have any real capability of defending Taiwan, and they might move the line back from Taiwan to like the Philippines or something, which I think makes a war with China so much less likely. That's based on what Elbridge Colby, who's the Pentagon's policy chief, was basically saying before he went into the administration. He was someone who was always a super rabid, China hawk, saying we got to get ready to go to war over Taiwan. But there's some indications, basically him saying that not enough has been done and they might run out of time. But having said that, they're still preparing for a future conflict. I mean, that's like obviously this is what the report said, but all these munitions and everything is about. And it also works as a great excuse to increase military spending and all that stuff. All right, so the next one here, Trump's NSPM-7 labels beliefs as terrorism indicators. So this article's from Ken Klippenstein's Substack, and he's really the only one that I've seen cover this. So Trump has signed a little-noticed national security directive identifying anti-Christian and anti-American views as indicators of radical left violence, called the National Security Presidential Memorandum. It's being referred to as NSPM-7 by administration insiders. And Trump's Homeland Security Advisor, Stephen Miller, said, quote, "This is the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism," end quote. And so this is different than an executive order, this type of security directive here. Let's see, he explains the difference here. So the difference is an executive order publicly lays out over the course of day-to-day federal government operations, whereas a national security directive is a sweeping policy decree for the defense, foreign policy, intelligence, and law enforcement apparatus. National security directives are often secret, but in this case, the Trump administration chose to publish the NSPM-7, only the 7th since he's come into office. So let's see. I just want to mention, so this is what they have identified, these beliefs they could identify as indicators of violence. And the NSPM-7 directs a new national strategy to disrupt any individual or groups that foment political violence, including before they result in violent political acts. In other words, they're targeting pre-crime. And, this is bringing the war on terror home. And this is the list of views that they say could be potential indicators of violence or terrorism: anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the U.S. government, extremism on migration, extremism on race, extremism on gender, hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on family, hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on religion, and hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on morality. This is, again, some of this terrorism stuff is very unsettling, especially when you see, what they do to people who they call terrorists over in the Middle East and Africa and now in the Caribbean, and now they're kind of turning this inward. All right, so that is it for the news for today. So please go check out our viewpoints. One from Paul R. Pillar: Israel is the main source of instability in the Middle East. One from Harrison Berger: America's ongoing humiliation ritual. One from Jonathan Cook: recognition of Palestine is a repeat of the West's Oslo peace fraud. One from Martin Williams: Parliament blocks declassified UK, citing our Gaza standpoint. And our spotlight from Nir Hassan: Netanyahu's deceitful UN speech. So we got other stuff in the lower part of our page. Go check out our blog. There's lots of content. I mean, I feel like I just went through a million stories. I think I wrote 8 today, which I haven't hit that number in a while, but there's just so much going on and so many different theaters and everything. It's just really nuts. But anyway, again, I really hope, and I'm going to pray for peace in Gaza, for this to lead to something good. We'll see how it plays out. But anyway, like, subscribe, comment, follow us on social media. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.